The millionaire thought it was just another night, but he was surprised. His fiancée was a virgin and innocent, and their first night changed everything. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The rain beat against the windows of the office on the top floor of the Morgan building in New York City, as if the sky was collecting an old debt. Nathan Morgan watched the city below through bulletproof glass, the car headlights dragging along, the avenues like points of light lost in darkness. His fingers drummed against the mahogany desk as he signed the day's final document. Another contract, another victory. Another step away from anything that might remind him of weakness. At 36, Nathan had built an empire based on a simple rule: never allow yourself to be touched by what you cannot control. Love was unpredictable. Passion was vulnerability. And vulnerability was the only luxury a man like him couldn't afford. His angular face and dark eyes carried the coldness of someone who had learned to transform every disappointment into strength, every abandonment into ambition. He didn't need anyone. That was the truth he repeated to himself every morning when looking in the mirror. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. His secretary's voice echoed through the room with her usual formality. "Mr. Morgan, Miss Abigail Hayes has arrived." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. Abigail Hayes. The name sounded strange in his mind, like a melody he couldn't decipher. He knew her only through photographs and reports his lawyer had prepared. 24 years old, orphaned, raised by her grandmother in a small town in rural Virginia. A woman who had inherited land he needed to complete the project that would change his life forever. Land that could only be his through marriage, a marriage that would be merely a contract. Nothing more. "Send her in," he replied, adjusting his Italian tie and assuming the posture he used to intimidate partners and rivals. The door opened and Abigail entered, walking with hesitant steps across the Persian rug. Nathan observed her, in silence, surprised to discover that the photographs didn't do justice to reality. She was delicate, but there was something in her brown eyes that suggested a silent strength. Dark brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and she wore a simple navy blue dress that contrasted with the opulence of the office. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a small, worn leather purse. "Mr. Morgan," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you for receiving me." Nathan stood up, extending his hand. When she touched it, he felt something unexpected. Her skin was warm, real, human. He released her hand quickly, as if he'd touched fire. "Please, sit down." "I believe. You already know why you're here." Abigail nodded, sitting in the armchair in front of the desk. She kept her back straight, hands crossed in her lap, as if she were in a job interview. In a way, that's exactly what it was. "My grandmother is very ill," she said, breaking the silence. "The doctors say she needs expensive treatment. In New York, I can't afford it." Nathan opened the folder on the desk, revealing the documents he had prepared. "According to your great-grandfather's will, you inherited the land of Hayes Valley Farm, land that I need to complete my expansion project." He observed her carefully. "I'm prepared to make an offer that will solve all your financial problems." Abigail swallowed hard. And what would that offer be? Marriage. The word left his mouth like a sentence. "A marriage that will benefit us both. You'll have access to the best doctors for your grandmother, a comfortable home, financial security. In exchange, I'll obtain the land I need." The silence that followed was heavy. Abigail looked at her own hands, then at Nathan, trying to decipher his expression. "And what about what a marriage usually means?" she asked with flushed cheeks. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his eyes becoming even colder. "That will be decided by us. I expect nothing from you beyond what's stipulated in the contract." Abigail closed her eyes for a moment as if praying. When she opened them again, there was a determination Nathan hadn't expected to see. "When would the wedding be?" "Next week. Simple ceremony, just the necessary witnesses." She nodded slowly. "And my grandmother can come live with us?" "Yes. There are enough rooms in the mansion." Abigail stood up, extending her hand. "Then I accept, Mr. Morgan." Nathan shook her hand again, feeling once more that strange sensation of warmth. He had made dozens of business deals, but never one involving a woman who looked at him with such sincerity, a woman who was about to become his wife out of desperation, not love. As she left the office, Nathan returned to the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained dark. He didn't yet know that he had just sealed not only a contract, but the beginning of a transformation that would shake all the walls he had built around his heart. The Morgan mansion stood like a monument to power and solitude in the most prestigious neighborhood of New York. Built in neoclassical style, with imposing columns and perfectly maintained gardens, the property exuded opulence and coldness. Abigail observed everything through the car window that had brought her straight from the wedding ceremony. 15 minutes at the courthouse, 2 unknown witnesses, some signatures, and that was it. She was married to a man she barely knew. The ceremony had been exactly as Nathan had promised, cold, efficient, without romance. He wore a dark grey suit that accentuated his imposing posture, while she had chosen a simple white dress, no veil, no flowers. When the official asked if they accepted each other as husband and wife, the responses were mechanical. Yes. Yes. As if they were closing just another business deal. Now standing before the main entrance of the mansion, Abigail felt the weight of reality. Her previous life, the simple house in the countryside, the days caring for her grandmother, the quiet routine had been left behind. Her grandmother was already installed in one of the upstairs rooms, surrounded by the best medical equipment money could buy. At least that had been worth it. "Mrs. Wilson will show you to your quarters," said Nathan, indicating a middle-aged woman who appeared at the door. His voice was formal, distant, as if she were a temporary guest. "Dinner is served at 8. Don't be late." Abigail nodded, following Mrs. Wilson through corridors decorated with expensive artwork and antique furniture. Each step she took echoed on the polished marble, creating a soundtrack of solitude. The walls were covered with portraits of people she didn't know, probably Morgan ancestors, looking disapprovingly at the intruder who dared to enter their world. "This will be your suite, Mrs. Morgan," said Mrs. Wilson, opening the door to a spacious and elegant room. "The bathroom is there, and this wardrobe has already been stocked with clothes in your size." Mr. Nathan was concerned with all the details. Abigail entered the room, impressed by the luxury. The bed was enormous, covered with cream silk sheets. A large window offered a view of the gardens. There was even a reading chair near a bookcase filled with classic books. It was like a 5-star hotel room, beautiful and impersonal. "And where is my husband's room?" asked Abigail, trying to sound natural using the word husband. Mrs. Wilson pointed to a discreet door in the corner of the room. "That's the master suite. You share a bathroom, but each has their privacy." Privacy. The word echoed in Abigail's mind as Mrs. Wilson withdrew. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the door that separated her room from Nathan's. Separate rooms, like a constant reminder that this marriage was merely a business agreement. The hours passed slowly. Abigail unpacked her few clothes, which seemed even simpler next to the expensive dresses Nathan had ordered for her. She visited her grandmother, who slept deeply thanks to the medications, and then wandered through the mansion like a ghost, trying to familiarize herself with her new territory. At 8 o'clock sharp, she went down for dinner. The dining room was intimidating, with a table that could easily accommodate 20 people. Nathan was already seated at the head, reading some documents while waiting. He had changed from his suit to more casual clothes, a navy blue dress shirt and dark pants, but still emanated the same aura of absolute control. "Punctual," he commented, without raising his eyes from the papers. "I appreciate that." Abigail sat in the chair next to his, a distance that seemed both intimate and infinite. Dinner was served by silent staff, grilled salmon, mushroom risotto, a delicate salad. Sophisticated food that she had difficulty appreciating due to the knot in her stomach. "Tomorrow you'll have a meeting with my personal assistant," said Nathan, cutting the salmon with surgical precision. "She'll explain your social schedule, As my wife, you'll have certain obligations. Business dinners, charity, events, public appearances. I understand, murmured Abigail. What about my grandmother? She'll have 24-hour care. You don't need to worry. Silence hung between them again. Abigail observed Nathan's profile as he ate, noticing the tense line of his jaw, the way his fingers held the fork with absolute control. Everything about him was calculated, measured, with no room for spontaneity. May I ask a question? She ventured. Nathan looked at her for the first time during dinner. You may. Why did you need to marry me specifically? I mean, wasn't there another way to acquire the land? His eyes hardened slightly. Your great-grandfather's will was very specific. The land could only be transferred through marriage to a direct descendant. You were the only option. But why not? Why didn't you try to find someone you could fall in love with? The question came out before Abigail could contain herself. Nathan stopped eating, placing his fork on the plate with a dry sound. Love is a luxury that men like me cannot afford, he said, his voice sharp as glass. It's a weakness, a distraction. I built everything I have by keeping my heart out of the equation. Abigail felt the blood rush to her cheeks. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. Nathan studied her for a moment, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. You're very innocent, Abigail. I hope that won't be a problem. After dinner, they climbed the stairs together, the silence weighing between them like a storm cloud. When they reached the corridor leading to their rooms, Nathan stopped. Good night, he said formally. Good night, Nathan. She entered her room and closed the door, leaning her back against the cold wood. On the other side, she heard his footsteps, the sound of the door closing, the absolute silence that followed. Abigail looked at the immaculate bed, at the silk sheets that had never known the warmth of two bodies together, and felt a deep sadness settling in her chest. It was her wedding night, but she was completely alone. The days succeeded each other in a strange and meticulous routine. Abigail woke up early, had breakfast alone in the spacious kitchen while Nathan had already left for the office, visited her grandmother, who showed slow signs of improvement, and then spent the afternoons exploring the mansion or reading in the library. At night, silent dinners, polite conversations about trivial subjects, and then each retired to their own room. It was like living with an elegant ghost. A week after the wedding, Abigail made her first public appearance as Nathan, Morgan's wife, a charity dinner at the Plaza Hotel, where she was introduced to the American business elite. Nathan had chosen a long teal-blue dress for her, high-heeled shoes that made her wobble slightly, and jewelry worth more than all the inheritance she had left behind. Smile, he murmured, as they walked through the hotel ballroom, his hand possessively placed on her back. And let me do most of the talking. Abigail nodded, trying to ignore the heat his hand radiated through the thin fabric of the dress. Throughout the evening, she watched him work the crowd like a maestro conducting a symphony. Nathan greeted, smiled, closed deals with a calculated charm she had never seen before. With her by his side, he seemed more human, more accessible. It was as if she were an accessory that softened his sharpest edges. Your wife is charming, Nathan, commented an elegant grey-haired woman. Where did you two meet? In Virginia, Nathan answered smoothly, his hand moving to Abigail's waist. Love at first sight. The lie left his mouth so naturally that Abigail almost believed it. For a moment, as he pulled her slightly against his body, she felt what it would be like to be truly desired by a man like Nathan Morgan. But on the flight back to New York, the silence returned. Nathan worked on his laptop, while Abigail looked at the lights of the cities below. When they landed, they returned to the cold routine of the mansion as if nothing had happened. It was in the third week of marriage that everything changed. Abigail had gone down to the kitchen during the night for a glass of water when she heard sounds coming from Nathan's study. Restless footsteps, the noise of drawers being opened and closed forcefully. Curious and concerned, she approached the half-open door. Nathan was standing before the window, still wearing yesterday's suit, as if he hadn't gone to sleep. There were papers scattered across the desk, empty whiskey glasses, and an expression On his face that Abigail had never seen before, pure vulnerability. "Nathan," she called softly. He turned abruptly, eyes red from fatigue and alcohol. For a moment, she saw through the mask he constantly wore. There was pain there, an old and deep pain. "You should be sleeping," he said, trying to regain his composure. "So should you." Abigail entered the study, closing the door behind her. What happened? Nathan ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it for the first time since she had known him. "Business problems, nothing you need to worry about." But Abigail had seen the papers on the desk. Legal documents, notifications, numbers in red. "Does it have to do with the land project?" His gaze hardened. "Abigail, I'm not a child, Nathan. I'm your wife, even if only on paper. If there are problems, I have the right to know." He studied her for a long moment, as if deciding how much of the truth he could share. "One of my partners is trying to betray me. He discovered details about our marriage and is using that to question the legitimacy of the land transfer." Abigail felt her stomach sink. "Can he annul the marriage?" "He can try." Nathan approached her, his eyes intense in the dim light of the study. "But for that, he would need to prove that our marriage is just a sham." The air between them became charged. Abigail could feel the heat of his body, the smell of his cologne mixed with whiskey and desperation. And how would he do that? Nathan's hand rose slowly, touching her face with a gentleness that surprised her. "By investigating our intimate life, wanting to know if we share the same bed, if we act like a real couple." Abigail's heart raced. "And what does that mean for us?" Nathan leaned slightly, his face inches from hers. "It means that perhaps we need to make this marriage more convincing." Abigail closed her eyes, feeling his breath against her skin. For weeks, she had wondered what it would be like to be touched by him, to be truly desired by him. Now, with him so close, she felt her entire body responding to a proximity that had been denied since the first day. "Abigail," he murmured, his voice husky. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" She opened her eyes, meeting his. "I understand." His hand slid to the nape of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair. "I don't want to force you into anything. If you say no, we'll find another way." Abigail felt courage coming from somewhere deep inside her. "And if I say yes?" The control Nathan maintained over himself began to disintegrate. She could see it in his eyes, in the way his breathing accelerated, in the tension in his muscles. "Then," he said, his mouth almost touching hers, "everything will change between us." Abigail rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them. Maybe it's time for a change. When their lips met, it was as if a dam had broken. The kiss was intense, desperate, loaded with weeks of repressed tension. Nathan's hands cradled her face as if she were something precious he had almost lost. Abigail clung to his shoulders, feeling the solid world she knew dissolve around her. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "There's no going back after this," he murmured. Abigail smiled, touching his face gently. "I know." That night, for the first time since the wedding, they climbed the stairs together. And when Nathan opened the door to his room, Abigail followed him, leaving behind the woman she had been and embracing the one she was becoming. Morning arrived soft and golden, filtering through the silk curtains of Nathan's room. Abigail awoke slowly, her body still enveloped by the sensation of strong arms around her during the night. For the first time in weeks, she had slept deeply, lulled by the sound of Nathan's peaceful breathing. But when she turned to look at him, she found only cold, rumpled sheets. He had already left. Abigail sat up in bed, pulling the sheet to cover her naked body. The previous night had been a revelation. Nathan had been gentle, almost reverent, treating her as if she were made of fine crystal. But there had also been an intensity in him that had left her breathless, an almost desperate need that she had matched with a passion she didn't know she possessed. Now, alone in the master suite for the first time, Abigail observed Nathan's personal details that she had never seen before. An old photograph on the bedside table showed a sad-eyed boy next to an elegant woman, probably his mother. Philosophy and economics books were stacked beside the bed, and in a partially open drawer she glimpsed the corner of a handwritten letter. Curiosity won over discretion. Abigail wrapped herself in his silk robe and approached the drawer. The letter was yellowed with time, written in the careful handwriting of a child. "Mom, please come back. I promise I'll be a good boy. I won't cry at night anymore. Please don't leave me alone." Abigail's heart tightened. She quickly closed the drawer, feeling like an intruder, but carrying with her the image of that abandoned boy who still lived inside the man who had slept in her arms. When she went down for breakfast, she found Nathan already wearing a dark suit, reading the financial newspaper with the same controlled expression as always. It was as if the previous night had been a dream. "Good morning," she said hesitantly. "Good morning." He didn't raise his eyes from the newspaper. "I left some things for you on the table. This week's commitments, social invitations you need to accept." The coldness in his voice was like a bucket of ice water. Abigail sat in the opposite chair, pouring herself coffee with hands that trembled slightly. "Nathan, about last night." "It was necessary," he cut her off, finally looking at her. His eyes were hard again, all barriers rebuilt. "My lawyer said my partner is hiring private investigators. We need to be convincing." Abigail felt the words like a slap. So it was just a performance? Nathan folded the newspaper with precise movements. "It was what we agreed to." A lie. Abigail had felt the truth in every touch, in every sigh, in the way he had murmured her name in the darkness. But if he wanted to pretend it had meant nothing, she wouldn't force him to. "Admit otherwise." "I understand," she said, keeping her voice steady. "And what else do I need to do to be convincing?" Something passed quickly through his eyes. Regret, perhaps, but disappeared before she could be sure. "This afternoon we have a meeting with investors. You'll come with me. Wear the green dress that's in your closet." The day passed in a haze of representation. In Nathan's office, Abigail smiled politely at men in suits while he presented his expansion project. She sat next to him during meetings, her hand occasionally touched by his in gestures that seemed casual but were clearly calculated to impress observers. And they impressed. Abigail could see in the eyes of the businessman that her presence softened Nathan's image, made him more trustworthy, more human. She was literally a piece in his corporate chess game. At the end of the afternoon, when they returned to the mansion, the silence between them was deafening. Abigail went up to check on her grandmother, who slept deeply under the care of the private nurse. The elderly woman seemed more fragile each day, but the doctors assured that the treatment was working. "She's better," said a voice behind her. Abigail turned and found Nathan standing in the doorway. He had removed his jacket and loosened his tie and looked tired. "Yes," she agreed. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to our agreement," he corrected. Abigail gently closed the bedroom door and faced Nathan in the hallway. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Pretending that nothing happened between us, acting as if I were just an employee." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign that he was losing control. "Abigail, you don't understand. I'm not an easy man to love. I'm not a man who knows how to love." "Who said anything about love?" Abigail approached him, determined to break the walls he insisted on building. "I'm talking about honesty, about admitting that there's something real between us." "Real?" Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You want to know what's real? What's real is that I bought you, Abigail. I paid your debts, saved your grandmother, and in exchange, you gave me your body. That's real." The words were like stabs, but Abigail didn't back down. "You're lying to me and to yourself." "I'm telling the truth." "The truth is that you're afraid," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Afraid of feeling something for someone. Afraid of being abandoned again, like that boy who wrote letters to the mother who never came back." Nathan's face paled. You read my correspondence? Abigail felt her stomach sink, realizing she had crossed a line. The drawer was open and I saw— Get out of my room, he said, his voice dangerously low, and never enter there. Without permission again. Nathan, I'm sorry. Get out! The shout echoed through the corridors of the mansion. Abigail backed away, tears beginning to burn her eyes. Without saying anything more, she ran to her own room, closing the door forcefully. From the other side of the wall, she heard Nathan enter his suite, the sound of something being thrown. Against the wall, then absolute silence. Abigail threw herself on the bed, hugging a pillow as she cried silently. She had touched a very deep wound, and now feared that Nathan would never allow her to get close again. But deep in her heart, a part of her knew that his reaction only confirmed what she suspected. Beneath all that coldness, Nathan Morgan was a man desperately in need of love and desperately terrified by that need. The question was, would she have enough courage to fight for him, even knowing that he would fight against her every step of the way? 3 days of glacial silence followed. Nathan left early and returned late, avoiding any moment when he might find Abigail alone. When they were forced to interact during meals or social events, he maintained an icy courtesy that hurt more than any shout. Abigail spent those days exploring parts of the mansion she didn't yet know, trying to understand the man she had married, through the traces he had left behind. In the basement, she discovered a trophy room with adolescent swimming medals, solitary graduation photographs, diplomas framed with military perfection. Everything very organized, very cold, very controlled. It was there behind a dusty bookcase that she found the box. It was a small chest of dark wood, locked with an old padlock that had rusted over time. Abigail shook it gently, hearing the sound of papers moving inside. Her conscience wrestled with itself for just a moment before curiosity won. She broke the padlock with a screwdriver found among forgotten tools. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, all in the same handwriting that evolved from the trembling letters of a child to the elegant writing of a teenager. All addressed to the same person, Dear Mom. And none of them had been sent. Abigail sat on the cold basement floor and began to read, her heart breaking with each line. Mom, today was my 8th birthday. No one remembered, but I made a sandcake in the orphanage garden and pretended you were here singing happy birthday to me. Mom, I learned to swim today. The instructor said I have talent. Would you be proud of me? Mom, a couple came to see me today. They seemed nice, but I said I didn't want to be adopted because you might come back any moment and won't know where to find me. Mom, it's been 10 years since you left. I'm stopping writing because I finally understood that you're not coming back. Never. Abigail's tears stained the yellowed paper of the last letter. She could imagine the boy Nathan, alone in an impersonal room, pouring his soul into letters that would never be read by the person he loved most in the world. Abigail. She startled, looking up to find Nathan standing at the entrance to the basement. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the open box in her hands. I was exploring and found this, she said, her voice choked. Nathan, I'm so sorry. For everything. He descended the stairs slowly, as if approaching an injured animal. Did you read all of them? Some. Abigail carefully closed the box. You were just a child who deserved to be loved. Nathan knelt before her, taking the box from her hands. I burned all the others years ago. These I couldn't. Why? Because they remind me of what happens when you love someone more than your own life. You become vulnerable, defenseless, and in the end you always end up alone. Abigail touched his face gently, feeling the tension in his jaw. Not always. Always, he insisted. My mother left me to follow a man who promised her the world. My father, well, I never knew who he was. Every family that considered adopting me gave up when they realized I was too difficult. I learned early that love is a luxury that people like me can't afford. What if you're wrong? Nathan laughed bitterly. You think I am? I think you're terrified, said Abigail, moving closer to him on the cold basement floor. Terrified of discovering that you can be loved for who you are, not for what you possess. Abigail. His voice was a warning. I won't abandon you, Nathan. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. Abigail took his hands, entwining their fingers. Because I chose to stay. Not for money, not out of obligation. I choose you. Nathan's eyes filled with an emotion he struggled to contain. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of when I'm afraid. Then show me, she challenged. Stop protecting me from your darkness and let me decide if I can handle it. Nathan studied her for a long moment, as if trying to decipher if she was being sincere. Slowly, he leaned in until their foreheads touched. There's a woman, he said, his voice low and tense. Victoria Harlow. She was my lover for 3 years. I ended it when I decided to marry you, but she didn't take it well. Abigail's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression calm. What does that have to do with me? She called today, said she wants to see me, that she has information about you that I need to know. What kind of information? I don't know, but Victoria, she's dangerous when she doesn't get what she wants, and she wants to destroy me. Abigail felt a chill run down her spine. Are you going to meet her? I'll have to, if she really knows something that could harm you or our legal situation. Then I'll go with you. No. The response was immediate, definitive. Abigail, you don't understand. Victoria is manipulative, cruel. She'll try to destroy you just for existing. And you think I'm not strong enough to face her? Nathan held her face between his hands. I think you're too good for that world, and I'm afraid it will stain you. Abigail smiled sadly. A bit. Late for that, don't you think? I'm already part of that world. I'm your wife. Abigail, don't protect me from it, Nathan. Prepare me for it. For a moment, they stayed there in the dark basement, surrounded by the ghosts of Nathan's past, while the demons of the present knocked at the door. Abigail could feel his internal struggle, the desire to keep her safe conflicting with the need for honesty she had demanded. Finally, Nathan nodded. All right, but you do exactly what I say when we're with her. Victoria is like a snake. Beautiful, hypnotizing and deadly. Understood. Nathan stood up, extending his hand to help her. The meeting is tomorrow night, in a public restaurant, to keep up appearances. As they climbed the stairs together, Abigail felt they had crossed some kind of line. Nathan had shared a part of his darkness with her, and she had chosen to stay. Now they would face together the first real threat to the fragile relationship. That was developing between them, but deep in her heart, Abigail couldn't ignore the sensation that Victoria Harlow knew something that would change everything, and that perhaps in the end, the truth would be more dangerous than any lie they had lived. The Gramercy Tavern was elegantly lit when Abigail and Nathan arrived the following night. Abigail wore a long-sleeved black dress that Nathan had chosen, conservative but enhancing her natural beauty. She could feel the tension in his muscles as they walked toward the reserved table. Victoria Harlow was already waiting. Abigail recognized her immediately by the way all the men in the restaurant observed her discreetly. Victoria was stunning in a predatory way, perfectly brushed platinum blonde hair, blood-red lips, wearing a white dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. Her blue eyes lit up when she saw Nathan, but quickly narrowed when they landed on Abigail. Nathan, darling, she said, standing up to kiss his cheek. You look great. Marriage is doing you good. Nathan maintained a neutral expression, but Abigail noticed how he stiffened at her touch. Victoria, this is my wife, Abigail. Victoria extended a perfectly manicured hand. Delighted to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you. Abigail shook her hand, surprised by the strength of the grip. The pleasure is mine. They sat down, Victoria occupying the chair directly in front of Nathan, forcing Abigail to sit to the side. It was a subtle power play, but Abigail caught it immediately. So, said Victoria after they ordered drinks, how has married life been in Westchester? Must be quite different from your little town in Virginia, isn't it, Abigail? It's been an adjustment, admitted Abigail, keeping a polite tone. I imagine. It must be overwhelming to go from such a simple life to all this luxury. Victoria smiled, but there was something predatory in her expression. Nathan has always had good taste for women who need to be molded. Nathan leaned forward. Enough small talk, Victoria. What do you want? Victoria laughed, a crystalline sound that cut like glass. Straight to the point, as always. All right. She opened a small leather purse and removed an old photograph, placing it on the table. Do you recognize this woman, Abigail? Abigail looked at the photo and felt her blood freeze in her veins. It was a black and white image of two young women, embracing and smiling. One of them was unmistakably her grandmother, decades younger. The other, it's Elizabeth Morgan, said Victoria softly. Nathan's mother. Abigail raised her eyes, meeting Nathan's shocked gaze. No, it can't be. Oh, but it can. Victoria was clearly enjoying the drama she had created. Your grandmother and Nathan's mother were best friends in their youth. More than that, they were like sisters, until something terrible happened. Nathan picked up the photograph, his fingers trembling slightly. My mother never mentioned a friend named Margaret Hayes, completed Victoria. Your grandmother's maiden name, Abigail. They lost contact after Elizabeth got pregnant with you, Nathan, after the man she loved abandoned her while pregnant. Abigail felt the world spinning around her. This doesn't make sense. My grandmother never talked about the best friend she lost when she decided to leave her son in an orphanage to follow another man. Victoria tilted her head. What an interesting coincidence that you two found each other, don't you think? Nathan dropped the photo on the table as if it were burning. You're lying. Am I? Victoria withdrew another document from her purse. This is a letter your mother wrote to Margaret shortly before she died. She was regretful, Nathan, regretful for having abandoned you, and she begged Margaret to take care of you if anything happened to her. Abigail took the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, desperate. Margaret, my dear friend, I know I hurt you when I chose Robert instead of taking care of my son. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Nathan is in a boarding school now and I am sick. If anything happens to me, please take care of him. He is all the good I have in this world. Forgive me for being so weak. Your friend forever, Elizabeth. Tears fell down Abigail's face. My grandmother, she knew who you were? Nathan was as pale as a ghost. Your grandmother knew who I was when you agreed to marry me. Victoria clapped slowly, as if applauding a theatrical piece. What a delicious drama. Just imagine. Margaret. Finally, just imagine. Margaret finally found a way to fulfill the promise she made to her friend. She married her granddaughter to the abandoned son she should have protected. Stop, said Nathan, his voice dangerously low. But there's more, continued Victoria, ignoring the warning. Because Margaret not only knew who you were, Nathan, she knew about the land too. She knew you needed it. And she orchestrated everything, so that Abigail would appear in your life exactly when you needed her most. Abigail stood up abruptly, the chair scraping on the floor. You're lying. My grandmother is dying. She wouldn't do this. Wouldn't she? Victoria smiled cruelly. Then why did she never mention the letter she received from Nathan's lawyer 6 months ago, asking about the possibility of selling the land? Why didn't she tell you that she suggested marriage as an alternative? The silence that followed was deafening. Abigail looked at Nathan, searching for a denial, for any sign that this was an elaborate lie. But the expression on his face told everything. Is it true? She whispered. Nathan closed his eyes. Abigail. Is it true? Her voice echoed through the restaurant, making other people turn to look. Yes, he admitted, the word coming out like a defeated sigh. Your grandmother approached me first, but I didn't know about the connection between our families. I swear I didn't know. Abigail felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. Everything had been a lie. Her grandmother had manipulated everything, using her innocence and her need to save the woman she loved most in the world. And Nathan had participated in the farce. You used me, she said, her voice cold as ice. Both of you. Abigail, it's not like that. Nathan tried to stand, but she backed away. Don't you dare touch me. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of Victoria. I was an idiot, a complete idiot. Victoria watched the scene with obvious satisfaction. Well, my work here is done. Nathan, darling, when you get tired of playing house with your manipulated wife, you know where to find me. Abigail turned and left the restaurant, ignoring Nathan calling her name behind her. On the street, she stopped to breathe, the cold, New York air filling her lungs like a slap. Everything had been a lie. The marriage, the apparent coincidence of meeting each other, even the love she was beginning to feel for Nathan. All orchestrated by a grandmother she thought she knew and a man who had participated in the charade from the beginning. When Nathan finally caught up with her on the sidewalk, Abigail had already made her decision. I want a divorce, she said, without turning to look at him. Abigail, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You got what you wanted. The land is yours. Our part of the deal is over. She began to walk, but Nathan held her by the arm. What if I say I don't care about the land anymore? What if I say everything has changed? Abigail finally turned to face him, and Nathan saw that there was something broken in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Then I would say, you're as good at lying as your ex-lover. She pulled herself free from his grip and disappeared. Into the New York night crowd, leaving Nathan alone on the sidewalk, watching his life crumble around him for the second time. Abigail didn't return to the mansion that night, nor the following night. She stayed in a simple hotel in downtown, refusing to answer the dozens of calls from Nathan. She needed time to process the magnitude of the betrayal, to understand how she had been so naive. On the third day, she went to visit her grandmother. Margaret Hayes was awake when Abigail entered the room, her eyes still bright despite the fragility of her body. She smiled at seeing her granddaughter, but the smile withered when she saw the expression on Abigail's face. You know why I'm here, said Abigail, pulling a chair close to the bed. The grandmother sighed deeply. Victoria Harlow came to visit. Me yesterday. Said she had told you everything. So it's true, all of it. Margaret extended a fragile hand, which Abigail hesitated to take. Sit here, my child. Let me explain. Explain how you manipulated me? How you used my love for you to turn me into a puppet? The old woman's eyes filled with tears. I was dying, Abigail, I still am. And you were wasting your life taking care of me in that small town with no prospects, no future. That was my choice. It was a choice made out of guilt, not love. Margaret struggled to sit up. When Nathan's lawyer approached me, I saw an opportunity, not just to save my life, but to give you the chance to have everything you deserve. Abigail stood up abruptly. You had no right to decide my life for me. I had the right to try to repair a mistake I made 30 years ago. What mistake? Margaret closed her eyes as if the memory was too painful. When Elizabeth wrote me that letter, when she asked me to take care of Nathan if something happened to her, I did nothing. I knew she had died, knew the boy was alone, and I did nothing. Why? Because I was angry with her. Angry that she had chosen Robert, for abandoning her son, for destroying our friendship with her selfish choices. Margaret opened her eyes, facing Abigail. But Nathan wasn't to blame for his mother's choices. He was just a child who needed someone, and I abandoned him too. Abigail felt her anger waver slightly. So you used me to compensate for your guilt. I used you to give both of you a chance at happiness that I stole from you long ago. Margaret took Abigail's hand with surprising strength. Do you think it was a coincidence that you fell in love with each other? We didn't fall in love. It was all a lie. Was it? Margaret smiled sadly. Then why are you crying? Why do your hands tremble when you talk about him? Why hasn't Nathan eaten or slept for 3 days? Abigail pulled her hand back. How do you know that? Because he comes here every day, sits in that chair where you are and begs me to tell him how he can make you forgive him. Abigail's heart raced. He comes here? 3 times a day. In the morning before work, at lunchtime, and in the evening before going home to an empty mansion. Margaret leaned forward. That man is destroyed, Abigail. And it's not because of the land or business. It's because of you." Abigail shook her head. "You don't understand. He lied to me from the beginning. He didn't know about the connection between our families. I made sure of that. But he knew. You had proposed the marriage. He lied about that. And did you marry him for love?" Margaret observed the hesitation on her granddaughter's face. "You married him for me, out of desperation, out of necessity. You both entered this marriage for the wrong reasons, but found something real amid the lie." Before Abigail could respond, the door to the room opened. Nathan entered carrying a bouquet of wildflowers, Margaret's favorites, Abigail noticed. He stopped abruptly at seeing Abigail there. I didn't know you were here," he said, his voice hoarse from fatigue. Abigail observed him for the first time in 3 days. He looked destroyed, the rumpled suit, red eyes, unshaven. He looked like a man who had lost everything that mattered. "I was just leaving," she said, standing up. "Abigail, wait." Nathan put down the flowers and approached. "Please, give me 5 minutes. We have nothing more to talk about." "Yes, we do." He looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. "Your grandmother told me about my mother's letter, about how she should have looked for me when I was a child." "And that changes anything?" "It changes everything." Nathan came closer, but maintained a respectful distance. "Because it made me understand that maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Maybe it was destiny." Abigail laughed bitterly. "Destiny? Seriously?" "Think about it," he said, his voice gaining urgency. 2 children hurt, by abandonment raised separately, finding each other exactly when both needed healing. You think that was just manipulation? I think you're desperate and trying to romanticize a lie." Nathan stood before her, his eyes intense. "Then answer me one question. When I touched you that night in my study, when we kissed, did you feel pity for me, obligation, or did you feel something real?" Abigail looked away, but he continued. "Because I felt something I had never felt before. For the first time in my life, I felt at home in someone's arms. Nathan, I know I started all this for the wrong reasons. I know I should have told you about your grandmother approaching me first. But I swear by everything sacred that I didn't know about our mothers, about the connection between our families." Abigail finally faced him. "And if you had known?" "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "Maybe I would have run away. Maybe I would have thought it was too dangerous. But now," he took a deep breath, "now I understand that perhaps our shared pain is exactly what can heal us." From the back of the bed, Margaret watched the exchange with hopeful eyes. "Abigail, dear, you can blame me for the rest of your life for manipulating you both, but don't waste the chance to be happy because of my mistakes." Abigail looked from her grandmother to Nathan, feeling torn between hurt and something deeper she didn't want to name. "I need time." "How much time?" asked Nathan. "I don't know." Nathan nodded slowly. "Then I'll wait, no matter how long you need." He turned to leave, but Abigail called him. "Nathan?" "Yes?" "The land, do you still want it?" Nathan looked into her eyes. "Keep it. It was always yours by right." After he left, Abigail sat down again beside her grandmother. Margaret took her hand with surprising strength. "That man loves you, dear, and you love him. Don't let pride destroy the only good thing that came out of all this mess." Abigail closed her eyes, feeling tears burn behind her eyelids. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe amid all the manipulation and lies, they had found something genuine. The question was, would she have the courage to fight for it? A week later, Abigail was still living in the hotel when she received a call in the middle of the night. It was her grandmother's doctor. "Mrs. Morgan, you need to come immediately. Mrs. Hayes has suffered cardiac arrest." Abigail arrived at the hospital by taxi, still wearing pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. Her bare feet in flat shoes slipped on the smooth floor of the corridor as she ran to her grandmother's room. When she reached the door, she stopped abruptly. Nathan was there. He was sitting beside the bed, holding Margaret's fragile hand, whispering something Abigail couldn't hear. There were tears in his eyes, and something in the way he held the old lady's hand made Abigail's heart tighten. "How is she?" asked Abigail, entering the room. Nathan stood up immediately. "Stable for now, but the doctors said—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Abigail approached the bed. Margaret was pale, connected to several machines, but her eyes were open and alert. She smiled weakly at seeing Abigail. "My dear girl," murmured Margaret, "you came." "Of course I came." Abigail took her grandmother's other hand, noticing how cold it was. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," admitted Margaret. "Very tired." The doctor entered the room, greeting Abigail with a respectful nod. "Her heart is very weak. We've done everything we could, but—" "Doctor," interrupted Margaret, her voice surprisingly firm, "I need to speak with my granddaughter and my grandson. Alone." The doctor nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Margaret looked from Abigail to Nathan, then sighed deeply. "I don't have much time," she said, "and there's something you need to know." Abigail leaned closer. "What is it, Grandma?" Margaret directed her gaze to Nathan. "Your mother. She didn't die of illness." Nathan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Elizabeth killed herself, Nathan. She was consumed by guilt for having abandoned you, by remorse for having chosen Robert instead of being a mother. When he left her too, she couldn't live with the weight of her choices." Nathan's face paled. "No, that can't be true." "The letter she wrote me was a goodbye letter. She asked me to take care of you because she knew she wouldn't be here anymore to do it." Margaret squeezed his hand. "You spent your whole life thinking she abandoned you because she didn't love you. But the truth is that she loved you so much that she couldn't live with the pain of having lost you." Tears ran down Nathan's face. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I wanted you to understand love before understanding pain. I wanted you to know that it's possible to love someone more than your own life." Margaret looked at Abigail. "And you, my dear, need to understand that true love sometimes leads us to make desperate choices." Abigail felt tears burning her eyes. "Are you talking about yourself?" "I'm talking about myself, about Elizabeth, about both of you." Margaret struggled to sit up a little. "I orchestrated this marriage not just to save my life or to give land to Nathan. I did it because I recognized in you two wounded souls who could heal each other." "But you lied to us," said Abigail. "I lied about the means, but not about the end. You love each other, even if you're still afraid to admit it." Nathan looked at Abigail across the grandmother's bed. "Margaret is right. I love you, Abigail. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you make me want to be a better man." Abigail closed her eyes, feeling her heart race. "Nathan, I know I started all this for the wrong reasons. I know I hurt you. But if you give me a chance, a real chance, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me." Margaret squeezed both their hands. "Life is too short to waste true love because of pride. Elizabeth learned that too late. Don't make the same mistake." Before Abigail could respond, the monitors began to beep rapidly. Margaret closed her eyes, her breathing becoming labored. "Grandma!" Abigail leaned over her, panic growing in her voice. Margaret opened her eyes one last time, looking directly at Abigail. "Forgive an old woman for having loved too much, and forgive yourself for deserving to be happy." Her hands relaxed in theirs, and the continuous sound of the monitor filled the room. Margaret Hayes had departed. The hours that followed passed in a haze of medical formalities, phone calls to the funeral home, paperwork. Nathan took care of all the practical details, allowing Abigail to process her grief. He organized the transfer of the body to Virginia, where Margaret would be buried next to her husband, and took care of all the costs without Abigail having to worry about anything. The next morning, they traveled together to the countryside, the first time they had been alone since Victoria's revelation. In the car, the silence was heavy, but not hostile. "Thank you," said Abigail finally, "for taking care of everything." "It was the least I could do." Nathan kept his eyes on the road. She was more of a mother to me in these last weeks than anyone had been in my entire life." Abigail observed his profile. "She loved you, really." "I know, and I loved her too." He paused. "Just as I love you." Abigail felt her heart tighten. "Nathan, you "Don't need to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "I know you're still processing everything. Just don't give up on us without at least trying." The funeral was simple, as Margaret would have wanted. Just a few old neighbors, the local pastor, Abigail, and Nathan. While the pastor spoke about eternal life and deserved rest, Abigail held Nathan's hand, finding comfort in his silent strength. After everyone left, they remained alone in the small cemetery. Abigail knelt before the headstone, placing a bouquet of wildflowers on the fresh earth. "She was right, you know," said Nathan behind her. "About us." Abigail stood up, turning to face him. "How can you be sure?" "Because for the first time in my life, when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about work or money or power. I think about you, about what it would be like to wake up next to you every day." Abigail felt fresh tears running down her face. "I think about you too, but I'm still afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that all this is the result of her manipulation. Afraid that what we feel isn't real." Nathan approached, touching her face gently. "Then let's find out together. No lies, no manipulation, no pressure. Just the two of us trying to build something real." Abigail looked into his eyes, seeing not the cold, calculating man she had met months ago, but someone vulnerable, hopeful, in love. "How do we start over?" she asked. Nathan smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen in weeks. "How about with a real date? Dinner, conversation, getting to know each other without contracts or obligations." Abigail smiled through the tears. "I would like that." As they walked back to the car, leaving Margaret to rest in peace, Abigail felt something settling in her chest. Maybe her grandmother was right. Maybe true love really could arise even from the most unlikely circumstances. And maybe, just maybe she and Nathan could build something real from the ashes of all the lies. 2 months passed since Margaret's funeral. Abigail and Nathan started slowly, like two strangers learning to know each other. Weekly meetings in neutral cafes, long conversations about dreams and fears, walks in New York parks where no one knew them as the powerful businessman and his contractual wife. Abigail had moved to her own apartment, a small but cozy loft in Greenwich Village. Nathan paid all the bills without her asking, but respected her need for independence. They were still married on paper, but were building something new underneath the legal structure that united them. It was working. Slowly, but it was working, until Victoria Harlow reappeared. Abigail was leaving a bookstore when she saw her. Victoria was as elegant as always, leaning against an imported car, smoking a thin cigarette. Their eyes met across the busy street, and Victoria smiled, a smile that promised trouble. "Abigail, darling," said Victoria when Abigail approached, curiosity winning over good sense. "What a coincidence finding you here." "Victoria, what do you want?" "Straight to the point. I like that about you." Victoria threw the cigarette on the ground, stepping on it with a high-heeled shoe that cost more than Abigail's rent. "I heard. You and Nathan are trying to rekindle the romance. How touching." "That's none of your business." "Oh, but it is." Victoria opened her purse and took out a thick envelope. "Especially considering that I have something that might interest you." Abigail looked at the envelope with suspicion. "What is that?" "Documents, investigation reports. Things Nathan would prefer you never knew." Victoria extended the envelope. "The question is, do you want the truth or do you prefer to live in the fantasy you two are building?" "What truth?" Victoria tilted her head, studying Abigail like a feline observing its prey. "The truth about why Nathan really approached your grandmother. The truth about what he knew about you even before you met." Abigail's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice firm. "Nathan told me everything." "Did he?" Victoria laughed. "He told you that your grandmother approached him first, that he didn't know about the connection between your families. But did he tell you about the detailed reports he commissioned about you? About how he knew about your habits, your fears, your weaknesses before even accepting her proposal?" "You're lying." "Am I?" Victoria waved the envelope. "It's all here. Photographs of you, reports about your routine, psychological analyses based on interviews with people who know you. Nathan studied you like an investment, Abigail, like a corporate acquisition." Abigail felt the world begin to spin again. "That's not true." "Then why are your hands trembling?" Victoria smiled cruelly. Take the documents, read them, and then tell me if the man you're falling in love with has really changed. Against her better judgment, Abigail took the envelope. Why are you doing this? Because Nathan Morgan destroyed my life when he discarded me for you, and now I'm going to destroy his happiness. Victoria got into the car. Take a look at the documents, darling, and then decide if you really want to build a future with a man who catalogued you as if you were a business asset. After Victoria left, Abigail stood on the sidewalk, holding the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. Part of her wanted to throw it in the nearest trash can and continue living in the bubble of cautious happiness she had built with Nathan. But another part, the part that had learned the hard way that the people we love can disappoint us, needed to know the truth. At home, Abigail opened the envelope with trembling hands. What she found inside made her blood freeze. There were photographs of her leaving the pharmacy where she bought her grandmother's medicine, entering the local church, talking with neighbors at the market. All dated 6 months before they met. There were detailed reports about her financial situation, her past relationships, few and superficial, her daily routines. But what devastated her most was a document signed by Nathan himself, commissioning a psychological analysis of the possible candidate. The report described Abigail as emotionally vulnerable due to the responsibility of caring for her sick grandmother, probably manipulable through emotional appeals, and unlikely to cause romantic complications due to apparent inexperience with men. Abigail let the papers fall to the floor, feeling nausea rise in her throat. Nathan hadn't just participated in her grandmother's manipulation. He had orchestrated his own detailed investigation, studying her like a predator studies its prey. The Kapsch phone rang. It was Nathan. "Hi, love," he said, and the word love now sounded false to her ears. "Are we still on for dinner tonight?" Abigail looked at the documents scattered on the floor. "Nathan, I need to ask you something." "Of course, anything." "Before we got married, did you commission any kind of investigation about me?" The silence that followed was her answer. "Abigail." His voice was tense. "Where did you hear that?" "Is it true? It's more complicated than it seems. Is it yes or no, Nathan?" "Yes." The word came out like a defeated sigh. "Yes, I investigated you." Abigail closed her eyes, feeling her heart break again. "How could you?" "Abigail, please let me explain." "Explain what? How you studied me like a lab animal? How you catalogued my weaknesses so you could better manipulate me? It wasn't like that." "No?" Abigail picked up the report, reading aloud. "Emotionally vulnerable, probably manipulable, unlikely to cause romantic complications. These are your words, Nathan." "Abigail, you don't understand. When your grandmother approached me, I needed to know who I was dealing with. It was just business precaution." "Business precaution?" Abigail laughed bitterly. "I am a human being, not a company you wanted to buy. I know it was wrong, but Abigail, you have to understand that was before I really knew you, before I fell in love with you. How can I trust anything you say? How do I know all this isn't just part of a more elaborate plan?" "Because you know me," said Nathan, his voice desperate. "You've seen who I really am. The man you've known these last few months, that's the real me." Abigail looked at the documents again, at the photographs of her taken without her knowledge, at the cold analysis of her personality. "No, Nathan. The man I knew is the one who commissioned these reports. Everything else was just a very good performance. Abigail, please. It's over, Nathan, for real this time." She hung up the phone and threw it on the sofa as if it were radioactive. Then she sat in the middle of the scattered documents and cried. For Margaret, for her own naivety, and for the love she had thought was real, but discovered was just another carefully constructed lie. Outside it began to rain, as if the sky itself were crying for the death of a hope that should never have been born. A week after discovering the documents, Abigail was packing her few things when someone knocked at the door. She expected it to be Nathan, who had tried to see her every day since the call. But when she opened the door, she found an older man she didn't know. "Miss Abigail, I'm Dr. James Fletcher, lawyer for the Hayes family." He held a worn leather folder. "I have something that belonged to your grandmother, something she asked me to deliver only if certain circumstances occurred." Abigail let him in, curious despite her emotional exhaustion. The lawyer sat in the armchair she indicated and opened the folder. "Your grandmother approached me 2 weeks before she died. She said that if you and Mr. Morgan separated again, I should deliver this." He took out a sealed envelope and an old key. She said it would be the last truth she had to tell. With trembling hands, Abigail opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Margaret's familiar handwriting. "My dear Abigail, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered the reports that Nathan commissioned. It means that Victoria fulfilled the threat she made to me before I died. Yes, she approached me and told me she would destroy both of you. And I let her believe she would succeed. The key that accompanies this letter opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank, main branch. Inside, you'll find documents showing that I knew about the reports from the beginning. More than that, I commissioned them first. When I realized I was dying, when I knew you would waste your youth taking care of me, I looked for a way to secure your future. I investigated Nathan Morgan as a possible match for you. I discovered about his past, about his pain, about how he needed our land. And then I orchestrated everything. The reports he commissioned about you were done because I suggested it. I told him that a smart woman would do the same verification about him, and that if he didn't investigate you first, he would be at a disadvantage. I even manipulated his need for control to protect you. Nathan resisted for weeks. He said he didn't feel comfortable investigating an innocent woman, but I insisted, said it was the only way to protect both of you from unpleasant surprises. In the end, he agreed, but with one condition. The report should focus only on your financial and family situation, nothing invasive or personal. Victoria showed altered documents, dear. The true report never described you as manipulable or vulnerable. Nathan never authorized photographs of you or psychological analysis. He asked only for basic information to make sure you weren't being coerced by third parties to accept the marriage. If you go to the bank, you'll find the original report. You'll see that Nathan refused to read most of it, saying he preferred to get to know you personally. You'll also see that he deposited enough money for you to refuse the marriage if you wanted, even before meeting you. Forgive an old woman for manipulating even your anger, my dear. But I needed you to reach the truth through pain, because only then would the love you feel for each other be tested and proven real. Now you have a final choice to make. You can use this information to forgive Nathan and build the life you both deserve. Or you can let pride and fear win and spend the rest of your life wondering, what if? Choose love, Abigail. It's worth more than pride. With all my love and my last manipulation, Grandma Margaret. Abigail let the letter fall into her lap, feeling as if the world had shifted on its axis again. She looked at the lawyer, who was observing her reaction with professional interest. Did she really do this? Manipulate even our separation? Mrs. Hayes was a very determined woman, he said diplomatically, and very intelligent. She predicted almost all the moves of everyone involved. Abigail picked up the key, feeling its weight. And if I don't go to the bank, if I don't want to know the truth, then the choice is yours. But I can say, as someone who knew your grandmother for 50 years, that she would never do anything. That wasn't ultimately for your good. After the lawyer left, Abigail was alone with the letter and the key. Outside, New York City continued its frantic rhythm, indifferent to the personal drama unfolding in her small apartment. She could ignore everything. She could tear up the letter, throw away the key and go on with her life. She could start over in another city, away from Nathan, away from Margaret's manipulations, away from all that pain. Or she could discover the truth. The complete truth. This time. 3 hours later, Abigail was at First National Bank holding an envelope containing the original report about her. Her hands trembled as she opened it and began to read. It was completely different from what Victoria had shown. The report was dry, factual, respectful. It confirmed her financial situation, her grandmother's illness, her lack of serious romantic involvements. But there were no photographs, no psychological analyses, nothing invasive or manipulative. There was a handwritten note from Nathan stapled to the first page. Request only information that Miss Hayes would voluntarily provide. In a casual conversation. Do not authorize surveillance or behavioral analysis, NM. And on the last page, a bank receipt showing that Nathan had deposited $200,000 in an account in Abigail's name 3 days before they met, enough to pay for her grandmother's treatment without needing the marriage. Abigail sat on a bench in the park across from the bank, looking at the documents as the sun set over New York. Nathan had tried to protect her from the beginning. He had given her a way out even before meeting her. And she had believed Victoria's lies because it was easier to believe that he was a manipulator than to accept that maybe, just maybe, he really loved her. Her phone rang. Nathan. This time she answered. Abigail. His voice was hoarse, exhausted. Please don't hang up. I won't hang up. Surprised silence on the other end. You won't? Nathan. Where are you? At home. Why? I'm coming over. We need to talk. When Abigail arrived at the mansion, Nathan was waiting for her at the door, as if he couldn't believe she had really come. He looked destroyed. Unshaven, red eyes, rumpled clothes. He looked like a man who had lost everything. Abigail, he began, but she interrupted him. I saw the real report. The expression on his face changed from cautious hope to confusion. How? My grandmother. She left instructions. Abigail extended the documents. Why didn't you show me this? Why did you let me believe Victoria's version? Nathan took the papers, looking at them as if he couldn't believe it. I didn't even remember that I had asked not to include certain things. And when Victoria showed those other documents, I thought... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I thought maybe she had managed to access parts of the report that I had tried to suppress. And you didn't think to show me the original. I threw away everything related to the investigation after I fell in love with you. I didn't want anything that reduced you to data on paper. Abigail approached him. Nathan, look at me. He raised his eyes, and she saw everything there. Love. Fear, hope, desperation. I love you, she said simply. I love you. Not the successful businessman, not the man who can pay for my problems, not the fantasy. I love you. The man who writes letters to his dead mother, who cries while taking care of an old lady, who tries to protect me even when it makes him look guilty. Nathan came closer, touching her face as if she were a miracle. Are you sure after everything that happened? I'm sure, but with one condition. Anything. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more secrets. If we're going to do this, we do it for real. Nathan smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen in weeks. For real. When he kissed her, there at the entrance to the mansion, where everything had begun, Abigail felt that they had finally found their way to each other. Not through contracts or manipulations or desperate needs, but through the conscious choice to love, despite all the reasons not to love. Margaret had orchestrated their meeting, but the love they had built themselves, brick by brick, truth by truth, forgiveness by forgiveness. And when Nathan carried her into the house that would now truly be theirs, Abigail knew that her grandmother had been right all along. Sometimes, destiny needs a little help. But what is born from that help can be more real and stronger than anything that happens by chance. They had found